Bibliophiles of the internet, my name's Adriana, and today, as you've requested, I'm going to be recommending a few of my favorite books featuring platonic relationships. Now, I do have a few caveats because I really want people to understand what it means to have platonic bonds and relationships. Even when you look up resources for what it means to have platonic relationships, the way platonic is defined is severely outdated and problematic. Most resources would have you believe that platonic relationships are defined by an absence of romantic or sexual desire, even though they are not mutually exclusive concepts. And many sources refer to platonic relationships as passionless and as relationships with few expectations or stakes. Hopefully it goes without saying that these ideas are patently false. Platonic relationships are not the strict opposite of sexual and/or romantic relationships. They are not defined as being whatever void is left over if you don't experience those two kinds of attractions with another person or persons. They exist within their own context, within their own right, based on their own merits, not because of what they are not. Platonic relationships are deep, meaningful bonds between two or more people where each person is truly understood, seen, valued, and accepted. They are bonds that nurture positivity and love because typically these relationships bring out the best in each participant. To me, it's really about a connection to someone's personhood more than anything else. Another thing I want to mention is that most people assume that the only platonic relationships worth mentioning are between people who could be attracted to each other but are not. So people go into recommendations like these hoping to find relationships where there's like a cishet male and a cishet female who have the capacity to be attracted to one another but instead have this really pure platonic relationship. Platonic relationships are not about purity, they're not about abstinence, they're not about resisting the sexual tension, they're not about defying the natural order of things, so we need to cancel that thought process. In this list, I really want to combat that normativity and show that so many kinds of platonic relationships are worth celebrating, regardless of gender, attraction, orientation, age, the type of relationship, or anything else. So with all that said, let's get into this list, which was so hard to make, by the way, because we need more platonic relationships in books. First up is You Know Me Well by Nina LaCour and David Levithan. This is Own Voices Queer Lit with two queer main characters, Mark and Kate. They go to school together, but they don't talk or know much about each other until they coincidentally meet up miles away from home in a gay bar during Pride Week. The two of them connect immediately, and Kate confesses that she just ran away from meeting a girl she might be in love with, and Mark admits that he's kind of in love with his best friend who's also queer, but most likely does not return his feelings. After that, they really become each other's support systems and push each other to face their fears and own up to their mistakes. This, to me, is a severely underrated queer lit gem that is truly at its heart about friends supporting friends in all the ways that count. In fiction, we see a lot of insta-love, which to me is not a real thing, but here we see instantaneous friendship, the formation of a deep connection between two people with shared experiences. When you're queer and the question of your acceptance in the world is a big unknown or an ever-changing phenomenon depending on where you are and who you're with, to find someone else and instantly understand their queerness is a very powerful experience. That's a big wall that instantly comes down when you find someone who gets it. It's a big relief, and it does create a real sense of connection between folks. That's why the bond between these two characters feels so easy and genuine, because they instantly understand a fundamental piece of each other that other people might not. Kate and Mark see each other for who they really are, not who they're supposed to be, and that's something that doesn't happen every day. The two of them are also very intuitive. They tend to know exactly what the other person needs at any given moment. They know just when to push each other and when to pull back, and it's refreshing to see such a natural, healthy, authentic dynamic between friends. Next, I'd like to mention The Adventure Zone, Here There Be Gerblins by the McElroys and Carrie Peach. This is the graphic novel adaptation of The Adventure Zone, a hilarious role-playing gameplay podcast. It's about a trio of lovable idiots, a human warrior, an elf wizard, and a dwarf cleric who are trying to track down these highly dangerous magical artifacts before they fall into the wrong hands. Not only is this an incredibly imagined fantasy world where evil, destruction, and pain are conceived as unnatural disruptions of the universe as it's meant to be, but at its heart you have these three unshakable friends. What I love about these good fantasy boys is that they all come from wildly different backgrounds. They have different abilities or affinities, and yet they're able to find common ground in this friend group, and they have each other's backs no matter what. They also have different fighting styles and different approaches to dealing with conflict, which is why it's so great to see how each of them seems to make up for what the other two lack. It's a really compelling bond because these characters are not bonded by blood or culture or belief, but rather by a shared feeling of safety and acceptance. Oddly enough, they work together really well. They're hilarious, they're supportive of each other's actions, and it's really exciting to read about and listen to how the strength of their friendship only grows. Next, I would be remiss not to talk about The Way You Make Me Feel by Maureen Gu. This is Own Voice's YA contemporary about a Korean-American teenager named Clara who's known for being a troublemaker and pulling pranks, until one of her pranks at school goes too far and her dad punishes her by forcing her to spend the entire summer working on the family food truck. As if that wasn't bad enough, the uptight classmate she pranked, Rose, will also be spending the summer working the food truck, and they will have to make their peace as co-workers and find a way to coexist. I do have to point out that this story does have a romantic subplot between Clara and this really sweet guy named Hamlet, but for me, as I read this book, I felt like the true love story for Clara was her friendship with Rose, how it blossoms and changes her life. I mean, when this story starts, Clara is not in a very healthy or mature space. She's not hanging around with people she really cares about, and truth be told, she's kind of stuck. But as she spends more time with Rose and learns what a healthy, open, supportive friendship actually looks like, she realizes that the person she was and the person she wants to be are in conflict. Clara is able to get real with Rose in a way she never could with her old friends. Those friendships were very surface, based on putting up a front, having a good time, and not considering the consequences. There is a sense of levity, relief, honesty, and respect in Clara's relationship with Rose, but at the same time they're able to let each other in and lay themselves bare in a way that can only be described as authentic. Like I said, this story is kind of a romance, but with a friendship like this, I would say any romance in this book is secondary at best. The next book was a very easy pick for this list, and that was The Lady's Guide to Petticoats and Piracy by Mackenzie Lee. This is queer historical fiction about Felicity Montague, who is actually Aro Ace. She would like to study medicine formally and work in a medical practice, but as a woman in the 18th century, there are no medical boards willing to even entertain her case. After yet another rejection, Felicity learns that an estranged childhood friend, Joanna, is soon to be married to a famous doctor Felicity worships. And if she can crash this wedding and take advantage of this connection, this could be exactly the break she needs. As she desperately tries to find a way to Germany before the wedding, Felicity hastily hires a pirate named Sim to grant her passage and pose as her maid, but Sim may just have some less than noble motives herself. This is a book that blesses us with platonic relationships because here we see them in multiple forms. The FF relationship in this book between Felicity and Sim is actually queer platonic, which I'll talk more about in a second, and then we have these really strong platonic bonds between all three of these leading ladies as a friend group and a unit. So as I said, Felicity is asexual and aromantic, and yet she does have a connection with Sim that is intense and intimate. That connection does dabble in flirtation or a sense of chemistry, but it does not generate mutual romantic or sexual attraction between them, which is what we call queer platonic. They care about each other, they're invested in each other, they're partners, and they even talk about what their life would be like together in a way that rejects any and all societal norms. It's really refreshing to see that on the page and to see that Sim isn't hurt or put off by what Felicity wants and needs out of a relationship, because that's extremely important. Now, the kinship and bond between Felicity, Joanna, and Sim is truly a thing of beauty because they are such supportive friends and each of them is willing to go to the ends of the earth to make sure the other two succeed and get everything they want in life. Especially considering the time period, here you have these women who are determined to make their own way in the world, to hold each other up through everything, and whose love can only be described as fierce and generous and fearless. When no one else will stand behind them, they stand up for each other, and there's really nothing else you need more in life than that. My last recommendation for today is my ultimate, my heart's breath. It's the embodiment of my purpose, and that is His Majesty's Dragon by Naomi Novik. This is historical fantasy that basically reimagines the Napoleonic Wars but with dragons. It's about Captain Lawrence, this prim and proper Royal Navy officer whose ship seizes precious cargo from a French warship. And that cargo just happens to be a dragon egg which instantly hatches, and the dragon happens to imprint on Lawrence himself. Suddenly, Lawrence has to leave the Navy and join the Aerial Corps instead, and together with Temeraire, the dragon, he is thrust into this unknown world of training and combat. Normally, I would hesitate to include a human-non-human relationship, but because this fantasy world is one where dragons are able to speak, think, and decide for themselves, and because they have their own consciousness and agency, I would say this is a special case. The power of Lawrence and Temeraire's relationship takes my breath away to this day because it's the type of friendship that changes lives. After meeting meeting Temeraire and realizing they're bonded, Lawrence literally has to give up his lifelong dream of being a naval officer to enter this world of aerial combat he knows nothing about. And he gladly sets all of that aside just based on the potential this friendship holds, and because he's now responsible for this little intelligent creature, and for his sake he wants to do what's right. As Temeraire grows, Lawrence reads to him and buys him pretty jewelry and helps him understand humanity itself. It's truly a relationship between equals who both have something to offer and who help each other learn and grow in deeply meaningful ways. And I think the backdrop of this war-torn society and its norms regarding propriety and emotional distance throws the warmth of their relationship into sharp relief, because they don't fit society's expectations and they are better because of it. It's largely due to Temeraire, who holds no regard for society's rules, who has no interest in letting anyone dictate what their relationship looks like or what they should experience together, who helps Lawrence realize that what they have is worth protecting and fighting for no matter what. As the two of them mature, as they're both tested by these extreme situations and by society itself, their love for each other only deepens, and I want to read about a relationship like that any day of the week. And even though they don't get their own spotlight, I did want to go through some honorable mentions. There's things like Awkward and Brave by Svetlana Chmakova, The Giant Days comic series, Phoebe and Her Unicorn by Dana Simpson, Foxheart by Claire Legrand, Little and Lion by Brandy Colbert, and Green Glass House by Kate Milford, all of which I strongly encourage you to look up yourself. So those are just 5 recommendations for books featuring platonic relationships. If you know of any books that feature strong platonic bonds between the main characters, I would love to hear about them in the comments below. But that's everything I had to recommend today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you on the flip side of the page. Bye!